All right, school age kids. This is around age 6 to 12-ish. Physiologic development, height and weight growth tends to be slow and steady. Their proportions are more similar to an adult. So now their limbs have kind of lengthened and they look more proportionate. All of their systems continue to mature and stabilize. We have less stomach upsets. They're less prone to respiratory infection. Bedwetting is not an uncommon problem, and what you need to know and be able to tell parents, it is almost always physiologic. It's not a psychologic issue. It's not a behavior issue most of the time. Most of the time it is physiologic. It's because their bladder size has not kept up with their growth and their urine production, because they're heavy sleepers, because they don't have adequate antidiuretic hormone production at night yet, or a combination of those things almost every time. So parents need to be aware of that. Now, a child who has been dry at night, who begins bedwetting, needs to be evaluated for a disease process. They may have a UTI or they may have diabetes. Those are two of the ones to look at. Major milestones: they go to school, they begin to have increased tolerance for separating from their parents, and they start losing those baby teeth in the early grade school years. Psychosocial development. On Erickson's theory of development, their conflict is industry versus inferiority. It's important for them to feel a sense of accomplishment and competence at a valued task. They prefer tasks that they can complete. So a chore that they start and they finish and they're done might be easier for them than a chore that it seems like it's never ending. So they prefer to have a task they can complete. They're developing skills in a lot of areas. They're developing cognitive skills and physical skills and athletic skills and reading. There's just a lot of things going on at once. They get better at things by continuing to do those things. One of the things that we see sometimes is adults want to give school-age kids meaningless tasks. They give them made up work. Kids are not stupid. They figure that out. That makes them feel demeaned. And empty praise, to being told you're the smartest kid in the world or you're amazing, all those things. We want to give accurate feedback to kids in a positive way. So I see that you worked really hard and improved your grade on this. Or you're a really good artist. I really like looking at your artwork, more than you're the best in the world at that, or you're the smartest, or we want to foster a growth mindset. We want them to understand and feel like they can accomplish things by working harder. School-age kids should have developed some ability to empathize with others. Younger school-age kids will treat others as they want to be treated. Older school-age kids have begun to see others as more fully developed other people, and so they can figure out sometimes how that other person wants to be treated. So a younger school-age kid may think, well, I want to play ball, so I'm going to go get this other kid to play ball with me. An older school-age kid might be able to figure out that I want to play ball, but they really like reading, so I'm going to let them read, or I'm going to talk to them about books. So they begin to be able to see that others can be different and empathize with those differences as well. School-age kids tend to have a good sense of fairness. They're exposed to people outside their families who live in different ways, and so they start asking questions. When you're insulated within your home and your experience of the world is with the people in your home, that all the things that your family does are the default. When you start being exposed to other people and doing things differently, then that brings up questions about, oh, well, why do we eat dinner all together and they eat dinner at different times, things like that. Peer influence and external adult influence starts to increase because they're at school, they're around kids in baseball and dance and whatever their activities are. And so they start to have more influences outside the family. That's important because when we move to adolescence, they're trying to figure out who they are as separate people from their parents. Anticipatory guidance for school age kids, a lot, the upset stomachs and the, I don't want to say pickiness, I want to say food jags, or I don't eat anything green. Those kind of things have faded out somewhat after the preschool years. School age kids may have definite likes and dislikes. They may have food aversions or foods that are preferred, but that has more to do with their individual preference of food. It's less about trying to establish control and more about, I really just don't like beans. So we want kids can begin learning, or they can continue learning about good nutrition. They can help with food preparation. They can help, they can try to figure out healthy foods that they enjoy. And the eating habits that were established early in life, really, this is when we really want to entrench those. At the same time, they begin to be exposed to other foods outside the home. They are at school and there's a pizza party. They go to a friend's house and they have a different type of food, things like that. Sleep, biggest issue with sleep with school age kids is probably other activities that are delaying when they go to bed. So it may be, if they're in a baseball league, they may play until late at night and then they have to come home and do homework. If they're in a very competitive school, they may have a lot of homework that keeps them up. If they're involved in other activities, that may happen as well. And media, watching TV, playing on the computer, on the tablet, on the phone, can delay onset of sleep. So we really want to encourage parents to ensure that their kids get plenty of uninterrupted opportunity for sleep. And if kids are having trouble sleeping, then they need to start, they need to work on trying to figure out the causes of that and address them. Play. Kids now are playing with other kids. They're playing cooperative games. They learn to compete. They make up their own games. They like board games. They also begin to develop often some solitary hobbies and things they like to do alone. So we really see the growth. We really see play becoming a way of learning how to live in a society. Discipline, school age kids can now understand the reason for rules. They may not have the judgment to agree with those or make those decisions on their own, but they can understand why we do or don't do some things, and they're going to ask. So reason is helpful, but there's still going to be a place for natural and logical consequences if they're not following the rules. Education, kids need to understand, and they model from parents and from the other adults in their lives how important education is to them. They take that information, they take their cues from the adults around them. So adults should model putting importance on education, having books in the home, learning new things. And that's something that kids pick up on with adults. Kids should be able to do most of their homework fairly independently. There are going to be exceptions. There are going to be projects that need adult assistance, and there also are going to be kids who struggle in a particular area. But the majority of homework should be the child's responsibility, and they should be able to do that. However, kids should not have tons of homework because they're in school 6 hours and they need time for physical activity and socialization and mealtime and getting adequate sleep. So sometimes nurses may be in the position of advocating for maybe lightening that homework load some. Electronics can take up a lot of kids' time. It also can affect the ways they socialize. Electronics can impede socialization, but for older school age kids and adolescents, electronics have really changed the way they socialize. They are in a community online a good part of the time. Now, arguments can be made about how healthy those communities are, but I think depending on the generation in which we grew up, we may have different views of how technology affects socialization. But electronics really can take up a lot of time. They can interfere with sleep. They can interfere with homework. They can interfere with social interaction and family interaction. Sex education is in this section, but I really want to push it back a little bit. We can start in preschool with letting kids understand anatomic differences, helping kids understand body boundaries. Consent in sex education actually starts with kindergarten, first grade, when someone doesn't want to hug, okay? Allowing children to have a boundary, I don't feel like being hugged or touched right now, and teaching them to respect other people's boundaries translates to respecting those boundaries later on when they're more interested in romantic relationships. So sex education isn't beginning with the mechanics when they're teenagers. We begin early with teaching healthy relationships, teaching boundaries, letting kids understand the differences in bodies and not making those things shameful. Young children really should know the accurate names for their body parts, partly because that allows them to report if they're being abused more effectively. But also that decreases the shame around those parts. And so it may empower them, again, to be able to protect their boundaries or to tell if someone is abusing them. If they have questions that involve gender, sexuality, answer them. Okay, if they have a question and you don't answer it, they're going to find somebody else to answer it from. So we need to teach parents to try to be open with that information. As healthcare professionals, sometimes we're in the position of imparting that information. Kids need clear factual information, and families can impart their particular family values surrounding sex without shaming if they start when they're younger. Safety. Car accidents, again, leading cause of injuries and deaths. Kids need to be taught if they get in a car, it is automatic the seatbelt goes on. Get in a car, buckle. Get in a car, buckle. I recommend that parents just don't move the car until everyone is buckled. If that becomes an automatic thing, you get in a car and buckle. That can carry over even into adolescence and adulthood. Bikes, skateboards, other things with wheels that are not motorized are really, really common. There's scooters, all kinds of those things. They need to be wearing helmets. Head injuries can be really serious. ATVs are not toys. There are lots of children who use ATVs. Strongly recommend that they don't do that without an adult, and that they're wearing helmets. ATVs can be very dangerous. I have a relative who was permanently disabled on an ATV. And I also have a relative who had a nephew who was killed on an ATV. So those are pretty, and I know that we all know those stories. So we encourage parents to not allow children to treat those like toys. Sports. Now kids are learning how to participate in sports. They may be on teams. And so now we've got risk of sports injuries. Sports injuries may be from one-time injury, things like being hit in the head or in the mouth with a baseball or softball, or they can be overuse injuries from playing the same sport year-round. So we want to recommend to parents that they make sure that coaches know how to teach kids to play safely, make sure that kids have the proper safety equipment, and it is safer in terms of overuse injury to play different sports, not to play the same sport year-round this young. All right, we will talk about adolescence in the next section.